So how can you start playing amazing jazz solos using jazz chords to your full advantage? Well, today I'm going to show you 3 levels to do exactly that. Coming up. What's up, Brent here from Learn Jazz Standards. We help musicians just like you learn how to play jazz, all while shortening the learning curve, no matter what instrument you play. On this channel, we do lots of jazz theory, jazz practicing, and even jazz improv tutorials like in today's video. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification button to never miss out on anything going on here. If you want to play incredible jazz solos, you got to stop thinking about playing scales over jazz standards and instead start thinking about playing chord tones. Scales don't really do a great job of outlining the chords in your improv, and I guarantee you that when you're listening to your favorite jazz musicians, that's what's making them stand out, is the fact that they're able to play melodic, beautiful lines all while outlining the chord changes. So I'm going to go back to the basics with you and go through these 3 levels that build on each other so that we can start figuring out how exactly do we start using jazz chords and chord tones in order to create amazing jazz solos. So let's do this. But do stick around to the very end where I'm going to share with you an important bonus level that will help bring all of this full circle and tie it all together. Level 1 is we need to start identifying the chord tones of the jazz standard that we are working on. So what we're going to do is develop what I like to call a chord tone map. Now, a chord tone map is simply mapping out the chord tones, but tying them together using something we call voice leading so that they connect together seamlessly. So we're going to use a jazz standard that we studied in my Inner Circle membership recently called Yardbird Suite by Charlie Parker. So let's look at just the first 4 bars of this chord tone map. Now, of course, this requires that you know how to spell out basic 7th chords and dominant 7ths and minor 7ths and major 7ths. So keep that in mind as well. So let's take a look at the very first chord. It's a C6 followed by an F minor 7, B flat 7, C major 7, B flat 7, and then an A7 that eventually turns around to a D7. So now let's figure out over those first 4 bars the chord tones. We have a C, that's the root, an E, which is the 3rd, a G, which is the 5th, and then the A natural is the 6th, since this is a 6th chord instead of a 7th. So now we're going to connect it to the nearest chord tone of the F minor, which is the A flat. Now the A flat is the flat 3. We're going to go A flat to the root, to the 7th, which is E flat, to C, which is the 5th, right? Because we're trying to connect these together using voice leading. So the A natural goes seamlessly stepwise to the A flat. We don't want to just be able to play chord tones starting from the root on up, because then we're not really training ourselves to do what we naturally do in improvisation, which is connect lines and notes and melodies together. So now we're landing on the B flat, that's the root, to the D, which is the 3rd, F natural, which is the 5th, to the A flat, which is the 7th. So we have now we're going to go back to the C major 7 and start on the root there. So not necessarily proper voice leading, but it's going to help us connect the rest of the line pretty seamlessly. So we're going to go C to E, that's the 3rd, G is the 5th, B natural is the 7th, and then we're going to connect that down to B flat on the B flat chord, that's the root. Okay, ending on the 3rd, that's the G, and then finally to the A7, we're going to go down a half step to C sharp, which is the 3rd. So 3rd, 5th, 7th, root. So in totality, it sounds like this. Okay, this is a chord tone map, very basic. If you are a guitar player, it could be a good idea to take this up an octave so that you're not just getting used to playing the chord tones in one spot. Saxophone players and horn players and any instrument, that's also a good idea to do. And of course, this is just the first 4 bars. You would want to continue doing this throughout the rest of the tune. And now that we got the basic framework together for mapping out this jazz standard, let's go to level number 2, which is guide tones. Now, the guide tones are simply taking the existing chord tones that we have and and narrowing it down even further to the ones that we most often want to resolve to in our lines, and those are the thirds and sevenths of each chord. So you'll often hear that the difference between one quality of chord to the next is either the third or the seventh. This is really what's spelling out the chord and making it sound different. So it's a good idea always for us to be aware of where these guide tones are so that we can resolve to them in our lines. And that's where our guide tone map comes in. This is of course just an exercise, but by basically identifying where they are, we can then start to think about how to resolve to them creatively. So let's go through this guide tone map of the first 4 bars of Yardbird Suite. Now, first over the C6, the guide tones are going to be the 3rd and the 6th, since of course there is no 7th. So it's going to be E to A is our 2 guide tones for C6, E, A, the 3rd and the 6th, and then we're going to resolve down to the A flat, which is of course the 3rd of F minor, so 3rd to the 7th. And then the 3rd and the 7th of B flat is D and A flat. So we have this. Okay, then we're gonna go to the E to B natural. That's the 7th of C major 7. And then down to A flat, which is the 7th of B flat, to the D, which is the 3rd. And then C sharp is the 3rd, and G is the 7th of A. So now the guide tones, voice led, just like this, sound like this. Now, of course, obviously, this isn't very musical, but again, keep in mind that we're simply taking the chord tones, breaking them down to the tones that we want to resolve to most often. And by mapping this out, we're setting ourselves up for success in the long run. Now, this brings us to level number 3, which is approach tones. Now, this really marries the chord tones and the guide tones together, as well as notes that you may be familiar with in the scales of each one of these chords. The idea of the approach tone map, which is what we're going to go over right now, is to start taking those guide tones and chord tones and figuring out different ways that we can resolve to them. Again, it's important to keep in mind that this is still an exercise and this isn't 100% musical in and of itself, but we're taking these baby steps to being able to start outlining the chord changes in a melodic fashion. So let's take a listen to what this approach tone map for the first 4 bars of Yardbird Suite sound like. Okay, so let's go over that. You see the arrows on the notes represent the notes that we are targeting. That's why we have approach notes that are targeting target notes. The first note is C, which of course is the root, and we're going to target the next note, which is the 3rd, that's E natural of the C. So we're gonna go C, D, F, E. So we're encircling, or we call enclosing that 3rd. Okay, so the D natural and the F are approach notes that are landing on chord tones or guide tones, all right? So now the E natural and the G are enclosing that F natural that we're landing on here, which is the root of F minor 7. So that's our target note. Now we're trying to target the A flat. That is the 7th of B flat 7. So we're gonna do that by going G, B flat, G, A flat, which is, again, the 7th of B flat. So we have, and now we're gonna target the 3rd of the C major 7 by going F, D, F, E. Okay, E is the 3rd of C major 7. So you see we're using approach tones from other chord tones in the chord, or even scale tones, to arrive at important notes like the 3rd of the C major 7. Now, if we continue going throughout this entire process, the entire approach tone map, that's all we're really doing, is we're trying to figure out different melodic ways that we can approach different target tones, which are the chord tones and the guide tones. So this is a really excellent exercise for you to try to start creating melodies from scratch. Now for that bonus level that really brings everything together, that I would highly recommend recommend you include into your practice session when trying to do this is then after you're done doing those 3 mapping exercises, go and learn an etude or a solo over top of those exact chord changes. So for example, in our Inner Circle membership, we studied an etude called Beboppin' Birdies, which was a solo composed over top of these changes. So it sounds like this. And now what I would do is after I learned the line, I would go through and I would try to identify where are the thirds, what chord tones are we hitting, what notes outside of the chords are we hitting as well. So it's a good idea to first learn an etude or a solo like this, but then after that, go and compose your own using the guide tones, using the chord tones, using the approach tones, and using the information that you learned within that etude to create something of your own, therefore solidifying the knowledge you have of using jazz chords to start creating amazing jazz solos. And by the way, if you want help doing all of this, we actually do this process every single month in our LJS Inner Circle membership. We have something called the Jazz Standards Club where we learn a new jazz standard every single month and complete with all of these resources as well as training videos and a community of other musicians to practice this along with. It can be a really powerful experience and incredibly motivational and help you actually take action on these things. So check it out at ljsinnercircle.com. Also leave that on the screen right here so that you can check it out, and we'd love to have you join us as a member. Now, by the way, this approach tone map that I just showed you actually was only using what we call diatonic notes, not necessarily chromatic notes. So I'm leaving on the screen this how to play instant bebop, where it actually shows you how to use approach tones in a chromatic sense to really start making your jazz lines sound like bebop. So check that out on the screen right now. Make sure you like this video if you got value out of it, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.